Pay now or I call the police and have you dragged out of this car." Emily Carter's voice cut through the rain like breaking glass as she yanked the back door open and grabbed the man's sleeve without hesitation, her fingers trembling not from fear but from exhaustion, anger, and the weight of a life that had not given her a single easy day in years, the storm pouring over them in cold sheets as yellow taxi lights flickered against wet pavement and passing headlights blurred into streaks of white and red. But the man did not move. He simply sat there with a stillness that felt wrong, too calm, too controlled, as if the chaos around him did not exist. And when she pulled harder, expecting resistance or at least irritation, his body shifted with unnatural ease, his eyes lifting slowly to meet hers, pale and unreadable. And for a fraction of a second, Emily felt something she could not explain, like the air had dropped 10 degrees, like the world itself had paused to watch what she had just done. But she pushed that feeling down immediately because she did not have the luxury of fear, not tonight, not when her phone was buzzing with unpaid bills and her mother lay in a hospital bed waiting for a surgery that cost more than Emily could make in a year. So she tightened her grip and said it again, slower this time, louder, demanding, "You owe me $38.70, and you are not walking away." Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you cannot miss. The man stepped out of the taxi then, finally, tall enough that Emily had to tilt her head back slightly, rain sliding off his dark coat, without soaking it the way it should have, his presence quiet but overwhelming, like standing too close to the edge of something deep and endless. And still he said nothing, not an apology, not an excuse, not even irritation, which somehow made Emily angrier, because men like him always thought silence was power, always thought people like her would back down. But she did not. She reached for the payment scanner with one hand and held it out toward him, her other hand still gripping his sleeve as if letting go might mean losing control of the situation entirely. "Card or cash?" she snapped, breath visible in the cold air now. Something she did not notice, something she did not question, because all she could see was another man trying to walk away without paying, and she had dealt with too many of those already. But when he finally moved, it was not rushed or annoyed, it was deliberate, almost slow, as he reached into his coat and pulled out a card so dark it seemed to absorb the light. Around it, no logo, no numbers visible, just a smooth black surface that made the scanner in her hand flicker the moment it came close. And somewhere behind them, without Emily realizing it yet, engines began to hum softly in the distance, low and synchronized, like something was coming, something that did not belong to the normal world she thought she understood. The scanner in Emily Carter's hand flickered once, then twice, then went completely dark as if someone had pulled the power out of the world itself. And for a brief, strange moment, the only sound left was the rain hitting the pavement in steady, hollow beats, her heartbeat sinking with it as confusion crept in beneath her anger. "What the hell?" she muttered, tapping the device hard with her thumb. Shaking it once like that might force it back to life. But the screen stayed black, no error. Message, no signal, just nothing. And when she looked up again, the man was still watching her, unmoving, those pale eyes steady in a way that made her chest tighten without warning. Not fear exactly, but something close to it, something unfamiliar. And she hated that feeling more than anything. So she forced her voice back into control, sharp and loud. "Your card broke my machine. Great. Now you are definitely not going anywhere until you pay." She shifted her stance, blocking the open door of the taxi, one foot planted firmly on the wet asphalt as if daring him to try to step past her. The city around them continuing as normal in the distance, cars passing, horns echoing faintly, neon signs buzzing overhead. But right here, in the narrow space between the cab and the sidewalk, everything felt compressed, slowed, like the world was holding its breath. The man finally moved again, not stepping away, not arguing, just lifting his hand slightly, palm open, as if offering the card again without a word. And that silence, that complete refusal to engage like a normal person, pushed Emily closer to the edge. "Say something," she snapped, her voice cracking just enough to betray the exhaustion beneath it. "You think you can just stand there and stare at me, and this goes away?" The wind shifted then, cold air cutting through her soaked jacket, and she shivered despite herself. But the man did not react to the cold at all. Not a single muscle tightening. Not a breath visible. Just that same stillness. That same impossible calm. And somewhere behind them, closer now, the low hum of engines grew louder. Not fast, not aggressive. Just controlled, deliberate, and perfectly synchronized. Emily glanced over her shoulder instinctively, her grip on the door tightening as she saw headlights turning into the narrow street one by one. Dark vehicles, all the same shape, all moving with a precision that did not belong to normal traffic. Her attention snapped back to the man immediately, suspicion flaring. "Are those with you?" she demanded. But he did not answer. He simply watched her, and for the first time, she noticed something else, something small but wrong. The rain that soaked her hair and clothes slid off his coat without leaving a mark, droplets hitting the fabric and then vanishing like they had never been there. Her mind tried to explain it away. Expensive material, some kind of water, resistant design. But the explanation felt thin, weak, like a lie she was telling herself because the truth was something she was not ready to face. The engine stopped then, all at once, the sound cutting out so cleanly it felt unnatural, doors opening in quiet unison behind her. And she did not turn around this time. She did not need to. She could feel it, the shift in the air, the weight of attention settling on this exact spot. On her, on him, like something important had just been found. Emily swallowed, forcing her chin up, refusing to step back even as her instincts screamed at her to move, to leave, to pretend none of this was happening. "I asked you a question," she said again, quieter now, but no less firm, her voice steady through sheer will alone. "You owe me $38.70. And the man finally tilted his head slightly, just enough to show acknowledgement, just enough to send a strange, quiet ripple through the space between them. And when he spoke, his voice was low, calm, and completely certain. "You will be paid." And something about the way he said it, not defensive, not dismissive, but absolute, like a statement of fact rather than a promise, made the world feel smaller, tighter, like everything was about to change in ways Emily could not yet understand. The rain had not slowed, but the world around Emily Carter no longer felt like the same city she had been driving through just minutes ago, because now there were men standing behind her, silent and still, their presence pressing against her back like a wall she could not see. And even without turning around she knew they were not ordinary. She could feel it in the way the air had shifted, colder, heavier, as if something ancient had stepped into a place it did not belong. And when she finally forced herself to glance over her shoulder, what she saw made her grip tighten on the taxi door without realizing it. 5 men in dark coats stood in a perfect line, rain sliding off their shoulders the same unnatural way it did from the man in front of her, their posture straight, their eyes sharp, not one of them speaking, not one of them moving unnecessarily, and then, almost in unison, they lowered their heads slightly, not to her, but to him, the man she had just been yelling at for $38.70, "Sir," one of them said quietly, his voice controlled, respectful, but carrying a weight that did not belong to normal conversation, and Emily felt something twist in her chest, confusion mixing with a rising sense of unease, because people did not look at other people like that unless there was a reason, unless there was power involved, real power, the kind that did not need to be announced. The man in front of her did not turn to acknowledge them right away, his attention still fixed on Emily, and that alone made her pulse pick up, because it meant whatever these men were, whatever authority they carried, it came from him, not the other way around. "The vehicle is ready," another man said, and this time, Emily noticed something else, the way he avoided looking directly at her, like she was either beneath his notice or too dangerous to acknowledge. She could not tell which, and she hated not knowing, hated the feeling of being the only one in this situation who did not understand what was happening. So she straightened her shoulders, forcing her voice steady again. "I do not care who you are or how many people you brought," she said, louder now, refusing to let herself be pushed aside. "He still has not paid me." There was a pause, not long, but long enough to feel intentional, and then one of the men behind her stepped forward, reaching into his coat, pulling out a wallet with precise, controlled movement. But before he could speak, before he could offer anything, the man in front of her lifted his hand slightly, a small gesture, barely noticeable, and yet it stopped everything instantly. The other man froze mid-motion, his hand still holding the wallet, his head lowering again in silent obedience. Emily's breath caught, not because of fear, but because of the realization settling in slowly, heavily, that she was not dealing with a normal person. This was not just some wealthy man with security. This was something else entirely, something that operated on rules she did not understand. "You said I owe you," the man said, his voice calm, almost quiet, but it carried through the rain as if the storm itself was making space for it. "Tell me your name." The question caught her off guard, pulling her out of her anger just enough to make her hesitate, which only made her more frustrated. "Emily," she said quickly, almost defensively. "Emily Carter." He repeated it, slower, like he was testing the sound of it, like it mattered in a way her name had never mattered before. And then he took a step closer, not aggressive, not threatening, but close enough that she could see the faint shift in his eyes, a hint of something darker beneath the surface, something not entirely human. And for the first time, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that she should step away, that she should let this go. But she did not move. She could not, because backing down now would mean everything she had fought through, every long shift, every unpaid bill, every sacrifice, meant nothing, and she refused to accept that. $38.70, she said again, her voice quieter now, but unshaken. And this time, when he looked at her, something changed, not anger, not annoyance, but interest, real and unmistakable, as if for the first time in a very long time, someone had done something he did not expect. And behind them, one of the men finally spoke again, his voice lower now, almost careful. "My lord." And the word hung in the air. Between them, heavy, undeniable, a single title that shifted everything Emily thought she understood about the man standing in front of her, even if she did not yet know exactly what it meant. The word hung in the air like something alive, pressing down on Emily Carter's chest before she could even process it. "My lord," not sir, not boss, not anything she had ever heard in the real world she lived in. And for a brief second her mind tried to reject it, tried to force it into something normal, maybe a joke, maybe some strange corporate title, but nothing about the way those men stood, the way they lowered their heads, the way they waited without breathing too loudly, felt like a joke. It felt like law, like hierarchy, like something older than the city itself. And Emily felt her grip on the taxi door loosen just slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of realization slowly settling in. She was standing in the middle of something she did not understand, and she had already crossed a line she could not see. But even then, even with that realization creeping in, she did not step back, because stepping back would mean admitting she had been wrong to stand her ground. And that was something she could not afford, not tonight, not when every dollar mattered. "My lord," she repeated under her breath, the words unfamiliar, almost bitter on her tongue. And then she looked back at him, really looked this time, at the way the rain avoided him, at the stillness in his posture, at the eyes that seemed to hold something far deeper than irritation or patience, and something in her chest tightened again, not fear, not exactly, but awareness, sharp and undeniable. "I do not care what they call you," she said, forcing the words out steady, standing in front of her. And when she looked up at him again, her voice came out quieter, no longer sharp, no longer angry, but uncertain in a way she hated. "What is this?" she asked. And for the first time since this started, he answered her without delay, his voice calm, steady, and carrying a weight that made the question feel small in comparison. "It means," he said, his eyes never leaving hers, "that this city does not process my payments. It belongs to them." And then, after a brief pause, just enough to let that sink in, he added, almost as an afterthought, "And now, Emily Carter, you have made a claim against it." Emily Carter felt the words settle into her chest like something heavy and immovable, like a truth that refused to be ignored no matter how much she wanted to reject it. "This city does not process my payments. It belongs to them." The sentence echoed in her mind as the rain continued to fall around them. But now the sound felt distant, muted, as if her world had narrowed down to the man in front of her and the glowing screen still in his hand. Her fingers tightened slowly into fists at her sides, grounding herself, forcing herself to stay present. Because if she let her thoughts spiral, she would lose control of the only thing she still had, her voice. "That is not how money works," she said, quieter now, but still firm, still holding on to logic like it was the last solid thing beneath her feet. "You do not own a city. Nobody owns a city." But even as she said it, the confidence in her tone wavered, because everything around her was already proving that whatever rules she believed in did not apply here. The men behind her had not moved, not spoken, not even shifted their weight. But she could feel their attention now, sharper, focused entirely on her, like she had stepped into a space reserved for something far above her place. And still, none of them interrupted, none of them corrected her, because the man in front of her had not given permission. Alexander Voss watched her in silence for a moment longer, and then, slowly, he extended the scanner back toward her, the screen still glowing with that impossible message. "Read it again," he said, his voice calm, almost patient, as if he was giving her time to understand something she was not yet ready to see. Emily hesitated, her hand hovering for a fraction of a second before she took the device back, her fingers brushing his again briefly, and that same strange sensation flickered through her, sharper this time, enough to make her inhale sharply before she could stop herself. But she ignored it, forcing her eyes back to the screen. "Access level recognized. Owner authority verified." The words did not change, did not disappear. They stayed there, solid and undeniable, and beneath them, a third line began to form, slower than before, each letter appearing one by one like it was being written by something unseen. "Payment not required." Emily stared at it, her mind struggling to process what that meant, because in her world, payment was always required. Nothing was free, nothing was given without cost. "This is wrong," she said, more to herself now than to him. "This is not real." But the man behind her finally moved then, just one step forward, and when he spoke, his voice carried a quiet urgency that made her turn slightly despite herself. "Miss Carter," he said carefully, as if choosing each word with precision, "you are standing in front of someone who does not follow the systems you are used to." Emily looked back at him fully now, really seeing him for the first time. His eyes were not just sharp, they were unnatural, a faint metallic sheen catching the dim light, and something about that made her stomach tighten, because it confirmed what her instincts had already been trying to tell her. This was not normal, none of this was normal. "Then what is he?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it, her voice lower now, edged with something she refused to name. The man hesitated, just for a second, his gaze flicking toward Alexander as if waiting for permission, and when none came, he lowered his head slightly and answered anyway. "He is the one who decides what this city runs on." Emily felt the words hit her harder than she expected, not because they were loud, but because they were said so simply, so matter of fact, like there was no reason to doubt them, like it was not even something worth explaining, and she turned back to Alexander slowly, her heart beating faster now, not from fear, but from the overwhelming sense that she had stepped into something far bigger than a taxi fare, far bigger than her life as she understood it. "You are telling me," she said carefully, choosing each word like it mattered, "that you do not have to pay because the rules do not apply to you." And for the first time, a faint shift crossed his expression, not amusement, not irritation, but something quieter, something almost thoughtful. "No," he said, his voice steady. "I am telling you that the rules exist because of me." The statement settled into the space between them like a final piece falling into place, and behind her, the men lowered their heads again, deeper this time, not out of habit, but out of acknowledgement, and Emily realized, with a clarity that made her chest tighten, that she had not just demanded payment from a powerful man. She had challenged something that the entire city itself seemed to obey. The rain seemed colder now, sharper against Emily Carter's skin, but she barely felt it anymore, because her mind was racing too fast to register anything as simple as temperature. "The rules exist because of me," his words repeated over and over, refusing to fade, refusing to be dismissed as arrogance or exaggeration, because everything she had seen so far, the card, the scanner, the men behind her, all of it pointed to something she could not explain, something she could not fit into the world. She understood, and that was what unsettled her the most. Not fear, but the loss of control over reality itself. "No," she said again, almost instinctively, shaking her head once as if that alone could push everything back into place. "That is not how this works." But even as the words left her mouth, they felt weaker, thinner, like they no longer held the same weight they used to. Alexander Voss did not interrupt her, did not argue. He simply watched, his expression unreadable, his presence steady and unshaken, and somehow that silence felt heavier than any response he could have given, because it left her alone with the truth she was trying not to accept. Behind her, one of the men stepped forward again, slower this time, more cautious, as if approaching something delicate. "My lord," he said quietly, "the council has already been notified." The word council landed differently, sharper, more dangerous, and Emily felt her attention snap to it immediately. "Council," she repeated under her breath, the unfamiliar term adding another layer to the situation she could barely process. But Alexander's gaze did not shift, not toward the man, not toward the approaching tension. It stayed on her, unwavering, as if she was still the center of this moment despite everything else unfolding. "And they are on their way," the man continued, his voice lower now, almost tense, and that was the first time Emily noticed something new, something that did not match the absolute control she had seen so far. Concern, not fear, but concern, and it made her chest tighten again, because if people like these men were concerned, then whatever was coming was not something she wanted to be here for. "I did not call anyone," she said quickly, her voice sharper now, defensive. "I just wanted my fare." But no one responded to that. No one dismissed her or reassured her, because the situation had already moved beyond something as simple as money. Alexander finally shifted then, just slightly, his posture straightening in a way that made the space around him feel tighter, more focused, like something invisible had just locked into place. "They would come regardless," he said calmly. And there was something in his tone now, something colder, more distant, like he was no longer just speaking to her as a man standing in the rain, but as something else entirely, something that existed above the moment. "You made a claim," he continued, "and it was accepted." Emily stared at him, confusion rising again, stronger this time, because nothing about that made sense. "Accepted by who?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the tension, and for the first time, he did not answer immediately, his gaze shifting just slightly past her, toward the dark street behind her, where the headlights of the parked vehicles still cast long shadows across the wet pavement. And then, slowly, the sound came, not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakable, footsteps, measured, synchronized, approaching from the far end of the street, and every man behind her reacted instantly, their posture tightening, their attention snapping toward the sound with a precision that spoke of training, of hierarchy, of something deeply ingrained. Emily felt it too. The shift in the air,